there any statements? I call the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It started on the plane last Sunday night as we were making our way to Paris to represent Australia at the International Energy Agency meeting just 2 days after the tragic events in Paris the Friday before. The meeting of the International Energy Agency had been decided to go ahead because to cancel it out of fear would represent another small victory for the terrorists who seek to destroy our way of life. And as I made my way on that plane from Melbourne to Paris, I looked at the empty seats around me, which is not a common scene on a plane into a European capital city such as Paris. And once we got off the plane, there was an eerie silence in the terminal. And we went to get our baggage, and the young man who was escorting us, a Frenchman, I asked him what he had thought of what had just transpired, and he said he was horrified. And he himself was a Muslim, second-generation Muslim in France. We made our way to the hotel. We were briefed by security services about potential threats and what to do in the event that there is shooting or a bomb or another attack. And we debated as a group, do we go outside for a walk? Should we break into smaller groups? Is it too dangerous? Should we not go at all? And I asked myself, how did it come to this? Paris, a city of 10 million people, the City of Lights, known throughout the world for its culture, its arts, its monuments, its museums, brought to its knees by these tragic terrorist killings. But we did go for a walk down the Champs-Élysées, where there was a guard outside every cafe and every shop. The roads were not nearly as busy as they would normally be. And you could tell everybody looked at each other with a hint of suspicion and a hint of fear. And I have to say, that's how I felt as I made that walk. And we made the walk around the Champs-Élysées, and on the way back to the hotel we finished off at the Arc de Triomphe, Napoleon's monument to France's vainglorious past. And the irony was not lost on me or the travelling party, that here was a monument, testament to France's strength throughout the world, and here we were in Paris at the lowest point of the Fifth Republic. Because not since Vichy France and the Nazis controlled Paris during the Second World War had we seen such bloodshed and loss of innocent life. Later that afternoon, I accompanied Ambassador Stephen Brady to the memorial outside the Bataclan Concert Hall. And I have to say, it was more than sobering, it was shocking. Because outside the concert hall, where clearly police and ambulance services and other emergency services were still going about their gruesome task. There was, along the fence line, thousands of candles, hundreds of flags, thousands of messages, and so many photos of people had lost their life. One message will stick with me forever, and it said, "Rock kills you," and it had a symbol of the peace sign with the Eiffel Tower in the middle. Rock kills you. These were young people, more than 120, who have already lost their lives, who'd simply gone out to a rock concert on a normal Friday night. There was another message. Best wishes from Bingara, Australia. Nous sommes avec nous. A message from an Australian saying that they are standing with their French brothers and sisters at this time. All Australians feel deeply about what has happened and cannot be helped but moved about the tragedy that has befallen France. Because but for the grace of God, it could have been us. But for the grace of God, it could have been us. We have lost more than 100 Australians in terrorist attacks since September 2001. Obviously, the Bali bombings changed our nation forever. There's been Marriott hotel bombings in Indonesia. We've seen the Mumbai attacks. We know about the London bus bombings, the Madrid train bombings. Obviously, Paris at the beginning of this year saw the tragic Charlie Hebdo attacks and the attacks within the kosher supermarket. There have been attacks through Brussels, Amsterdam, and every other major European capital. And in Australia, but for the incredible work of our intelligence and law enforcement agencies, I have no doubt we would have faced such a horrible outcome as what we've seen throughout Europe. Let's be under no illusions about the threat from Islamic extremism here in Australia. I accept that Islam is not the problem, but we have to accept that within Islam there's an extremist ideology that is turning young men and women to a violent way. 110 Australians are fighting in Syria and Iraq. More than 40 Australians have already lost their life, including a number as suicide bombers. 190 Australians are providing support here in Australia to those over in Syria and Iraq, whether it's recruitment or financing. More than 140 passports of Australians have been cancelled. And ASIO and the AFP tell us that they have more than 400 high-profile terrorist investigations underway. That should alarm everybody in this place. Because we've seen what one man with a gun and a black flag can do in Sydney with the Link Cafe. We've seen the killing of the innocent police worker at the Parramatta police station. And we know that so many other more serious attacks have been thwarted. Australia has more foreign fighters in Iraq and Syria than Canada or the United States. Why is this? Where are the strong condemnation of what has transpired over in Paris and elsewhere? And I do believe the Grand Mufti should have done more. And I'm not afraid to say it. If we do not deal effectively with this threat, then we will be dealing with our own tragedy here in Australia. And I know the Prime Minister is seized of this, and the National Security Committee of Cabinet, and of course our intelligence and security forces. And we've introduced into the Parliament 5 tranches of security counter-terrorism legislation. We have resourced our authorities to record levels. We have deployed Australian defence personnel to Syria and Iraq so that we are the second largest contribution there behind the United States. We are doing everything possible to deal with this threat both at home and abroad. But there are hard questions that needed to be asked. And they're being asked in France when President Hollande, not because he faces an election in just a few weeks' time, or regional elections, and Le Pen and Sarkozy are breathing down his neck, but because he believes it. Because after Charlie Hebdo and the events at the kosher supermarket, where they took a more conciliatory tone, they know they have to change tack. And that's why Francois Hollande, in his speech at the Palace of Versailles, he said, France is at war, the response will be merciless, and the French Republic will do everything possible to protect its community. And he called for changes across European borders, tighter restrictions on gun trafficking and, of course, the movement of peoples, because as Ayaan Hirsi Ali, an incredibly thoughtful writer, a woman born in Somalia, made her way to the Netherlands, became a member of Parliament, famously made a movie with Theo van Gogh, who then was tragically stabbed to death by an extremist, by a Muslim extremist, and now she finds herself in America with personal protection. And she is now speaking her mind about her own faith, previous faith, grown up as a Muslim, about what needs to be done. And she has some home truths for us. And she talks about how Europe needs to take on some of these challenges. And she talks about how the infrastructure of hatred and some of the preaching that goes on in mosques needs to be tackled head on, and in our schools and elsewhere. We need to call out this extremism for what it is. It's a threat to our way of life, because I have no doubt that if that young 15-year-old who killed that Australian police worker in Parramatta could have got his hand on more than a gun, but something which would have caused more death and destruction, he would have. Because he believed in martyrdom. A life after the here and the now. Everyone in this chamber has a family. And that family is the most important thing that we have in this world. It's much more important than a career. It's much more important than a reputation. It's much more important than any material possession. But more than 120 people have lost their lives in France, and their families will grieve forever. Now, we owe it to ourselves and to the Australian community as leaders of our country, regardless of what side of the political fence we sit on, to not succumb to political correctness, to not succumb to weakness, but to remember that this is a serious, serious threat that can be defeated, and must be defeated and will be defeated.